This is AEhlers from Rockville High School, and I'm giving a practice IOC for Seamus Heaney's poem Clearances in Memoriam MKH 1911 to 1984, which I'll be focusing on the first 5 stanzas. The first 5 stanzas of Seamus Heaney's elegy for his mother is a depiction of the hard lessons passed down to him on his mother's side. Written in 3 italicized tercets and a sonnet split into an octave and a sestet, and strewn with images evoking manual labor and poetry and religious persecution and domesticity, the poem moves with violence, fear, love, reflection, guiding the reader to the conclusion that tribal identities both bind us together and drive us apart. The first section is all in italics, and it's 3 tercets, but let's start and talk about the title first. The title is Clearances. Now, clearances is something that has to do with getting rid of something in order to make room for something else. Clearances can be used in a pretty sad way of removing people from one place to another, as happened to the people in the Highlands of Scotland. Clearances also has to do with permission to do X, Y, and Z, which may come into play in this particular poem as well. It also has to do with the ability to see clearly. Now that you've cleared out stuff, what can you see and see clearly? As we move on to the MKH, that is for his mother, Margaret Kathleen McCann Heaney, who was born in 1911 and died in 1984, and this was written after his mother has passed away. And the poem as a whole is about moments with his mother captured in individual sonnets, and about the way they related to each other, and about her deathbed, and finally what it was like to walk out after she had passed away and the quiet that was there. Let's go ahead and talk about the first stanza. It's a tercet, and so it says, "She taught me what her uncle once taught her." Now, I need to remember not to read all of these out loud. She is his mother, and this is our lessons learned from his mother that her uncle taught her. And it's about how do we split that big coal block. And of course, coal blocks are used for keeping people warm, and you got to get the grain right, and it's all about having the technical skill. And this ties into what he also talks about in digging and in some other things about having the skill to do the manual labor well. And one of the things that I notice is that this is an end-stopped tercet, and we have a little bit of a rhyme between the split and the right. But it's one whole sentence in this tercet. The second tercet is about the sound, and this is what makes me think that this might also be about writing poetry. The sound of that relaxed, alluring blow, and just like when you're shooting an arrow, you need to get relaxed and then have this blow. So one of the skills that you develop as you're learning how to split big coal blocks is being relaxed and hitting in just the right place. But he uses some interesting words here. So relaxed and alluring. Alluring has to do with being attractive, and I guess there is something satisfying about smack, and it breaks into little tiny pieces. But the next line has to do with being co-opted, and of course in Northern Ireland we have people who have been co-opted by the British, and co-opted has to do with being assimilated, and obliterated has to do with being destroyed. And you have this violence that starts here in this thing, breaking up coal blocks. This is something that he learned from his mother, who learned it from her uncle. And so the sound of the blow and the way that it echoes teaches me to hit, teaches me to loosen. Now, one of the words that's repeated all the way through this first 9 lines has to do with teaching, and this is about what family passes down from one to the other. and it's about those life lessons that are taught, and to hit and to loosen, and we have that tension between hit and loosen. And also the hammer and the block, that we're to face the music. So not only am I learning to hit in the right way and how to be loose and how to do it with precision and in the right way, but it has to do with learning how to face the music. And that phrase, facing the music, has to do with um, living up to one's responsibilities of atoning for where one has gone wrong. And then he moves from the past tense taught to the present tense, teach me how to listen, teach me now to listen, and to strike it rich behind the linear black. And that linear black reminds me of the lines of poetry written in black ink on white paper, and you're listening to the sounds and you're listening to how to relax, and it's about precision, and again it's carrying on that same kind of emphasis that he had before. Now, as we move on into the sonnet continues with another block here, and this block is a cobble that was thrown hundreds of years ago and is coming at me now. And this is a stone that was thrown because his great-grandmother was a Protestant who had married a Catholic and was trying to go to church with her husband. And this seems like a pretty normal thing, but oh my gosh, people are throwing things at her. And she's described, so she's crouched low, she's running, people are throwing rocks at them. One of the rocks hits her. And the opening of this octave is that this cobble that was thrown 100 years ago keeps coming at me, that there's that conflict is still coming, that the legacy of that stone keeps going on. And the words that are used to describe her mother, his great-grandmother's sin is that she's a turncoat marrying a Catholic, that she is a Lundy marrying a Catholic, that she is having to run the gauntlet, which is a form of corporal punishment, and that she's running in this pony trap of this carriage at a panicked gallop, and her husband is whipping through the town, and people are screaming and throwing rocks at her. The next sestet, the concluding sestet of this sonnet, has some other things to call her. So we've moved from what the crowd is calling her to what the family's calling her. They're calling her the convert. They're calling her the exogamous bride. And that has to do with marrying outside your community, with marrying outside your class. And then he dismisses everything he's just said. He says, anyhow, it's a genre piece. And a genre piece has to do with about, like a genre painting is about being domesticity. He talks about the things that he inherits on his mother's side. His father's side, pure Catholic. His mother's side is this mix. And it says that this is, so he's got this rock that was thrown at his great-grandmother. And he's like, well, what do I do with this rock now? I can get rid of it. My mom's gone now. I can get rid of this rock. And here she's given me a rock. Instead of sort of the typical things that you'd be getting, you'd get silver and Victorian lace. That would be sort of more typical. Silverware, silver plate, whatever. And so instead I'm getting this exonerated stone. And exonerating has to do with being absolving from blame and absolving from wrongdoing. And then going back to clearances. So what are we clearing? We're clearing blow to the coal block and a clearing blow to his grandmother's head. And now we've got this stone and we're going to be clearing this out. And again, it's how do we handle these challenges? What is our legacy of survival and pain and conflict? How does holding on the past give strength? And how does it also continue this legacy of bitterness? And this is the end of the practice oral commentary from AEhlers.